All right, everyone, welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kim Kimball, somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent business owners. I have such a special podcast today. I am here with Katja. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, and we are going to dive into an effortless, efficient, effective conversation about business and doing different business honestly, and what I think is a completely different realm. So, without further ado, Katja, I will allow you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody, and hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. I've been doing this for years, and still, every time someone asks me, like, "Can you introduce yourself in a short and brief manner?" And like, I cannot. I absolutely cannot. And so, I would say, like, the shortest possible right now would be to say I teach body-based, but also challenging what the body is in this way, body-based approach to life in the most effortless, effective, efficient way. Just like nature, because sometimes I noticed that we confuse the especially effective and efficient with like capitalistic understanding of things, like more exploit, more, do faster, more, better for the sake of growth. Like, why? Because I said so, which is not the case. But because nature works in ways that is very effortless, effective, efficient. There's no hurry, there's always right timing, right conditions for everything to happen. And so I would say, what do I do? I teach human condition through the lens of resonance and field dynamics.
Yeah,
How's
I
that?
love I think that's, from what I know of you thus far, that does feel like a very succinct way to sum it up. And I'm even curious about, because I have training in somatics, obviously, and I was a doctor of physical therapy before, so I have a very heavy like body-based background. And it's very interesting to me because in my world, like, as a doctor of physical therapy, it was very devoid of spirit, of soul, of the emotional component. It was just the body. And then in the world of coaching, a lot of the world of coaching tends to forget the body. And then there's not this integration, right? There's this
Mhm.
divorce between all of it. And for you, I just see you bringing all of it onto the table, literally all of it.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious about this. Your work feels like a constellation of like many different modalities woven together, but also something that's uniquely your own.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, like, what led you to this path?
Curiosity,
Mm.
and the curiosity, and also because I come from background in myself and my personal experience, right, with quite some chronic physiological conditions, some history of like some history. Let's leave it like this. Which led me, and my whole life I was very interested. Like, I was moving since I was little, since I was 5 years old, dancing, then competitive sport aerobics, then like professional level. At the same time, building corporate career, because good girls do corporate career in the proper way, quote unquote. um, until my body just completely collapsed. And my whole life, I was already interested in like all things body, but it always felt like something that's completely separate. Like, I have my life here, I do my work, I have my relationships, and also there's a little like hobby interest around what the body is. And I was teaching yoga, and then I was teaching breath work, and then with this big burnout, complete like full collapse of everything, like I collapsed. And I think that kind of led me to start questioning what is the body even in the first place, because I felt like my everything collapsed, like literally my personal field collapsed completely. Like, I didn't know anymore, what am I, who am I, what am I, like, what is this, what is happening. And then with the background of yoga and movement and breath work, then I was like, yes, this is it. And then I started teaching it like a lot, because I am a very immersive person. I must do it.
Mm.
I must do it, and then I know, and then I can pivot, and then I receive so much input and insight. And then I was very quickly moving through different modalities, like also extensively trained in somatics and somatic trauma resolution, in fields like energetics and fields and this kind of stuff, in neuroscience of like how does brain work and like how does brain connect us to the outside world as well, in animistic approach to life. And I was like, no, I miss this piece, I miss this piece, and this, and no, no, no. And then this feels incomplete, and this feels incomplete. And I was just like so hungry to include the excluded. And then very like by doing a lot, I was it's like straight away I was teaching a lot, giving a lot of sessions and doing this work and being like really, really in it, which was to me it always like for those who cannot see, who are listening, like I'm keeping like moving my hands a lot, because to me it does feel like soup, like this magical soup and the cauldron, and then we put things like ingredients and secret ingredients into the cauldron, and then it's souping, and then something else emerges. And this to me was the process, like literally an alchemical process of there's a little bit of pain, there's a trauma, and there's generational stuff, and there's this and there's that. And there's the whole healing industry also in education, right? That's very much based, not everything, I'm generalizing, but a lot of trainings, a lot of coaching approaches, a lot of therapeutic approaches as well, are built on the same systems that cause us harm. And then that led me to questioning like literally everything. And since I was little, I was already so good in questioning authority, which drove my teachers crazy. I was like, yeah, like why this and why that? And like, no, I'm not doing these things because you said so, because it doesn't make any sense. And I'm autistic and ADHD. So, like a special wiring of the brain. And then everything kind of started making sense. Oh, yeah, like my body is actually very literally has a very different composition. I perceive life in a very different way than majority of the people. And then as I started realizing this and having a completely different experience of life, also letting myself feel the depth and the intensity of everything and the speed that my body was craving, but from a very resonant, like a healthy way, instead of this hyper arousal of the nervous system when we just go, 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 and there's no way to stop, and just adding more secret ingredients to the soup. And then like, wait a minute, like actually it's very simple when we really, really look at into the core of things, because everything is energy, right? Every like subatomically, our bodies are made up of 99.999% of energy. So we are more pattern than we are matter. And something that I've been saying for years now, and almost nobody, like every time I would say this, people and coaches, like I was working with coaches, and I was like, no, 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 you need to ground more. And so the phrase that just kept coming is, I am more field than I am a person. And I was met with a lot of misunderstanding. Like, no, 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 you just need to ground more. I'm like, oh, what is grounding? Like, what is body? And so, yeah, it's a like alchemical process of making soup.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think sometimes people have such a hard time understanding the things that we can't see, really, is what it may
Yeah.
come down to. Um, and yet there are many things in our lives that we can't see that we know that it works, right? Like we
Yeah.
don't know how EMF works, but we know that our phones work. We don't know how microwaves work, but we know that our
Mhm.
food gets heated up. Like
Yeah.
we don't know how x-rays work, but we know that, you know, we can then see a picture, right, of what is
Mhm.
on our insides. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to point to here is just because we can't tangibly feel something doesn't make it any less real.
Mhm.
And you're specifically speaking about fields, right? I've heard you speak about morphogenic, mythic, archetypal, ancestral, just like the vibrational nature of our
Mhm.
experience as human
Mhm.
beings. And how, you're talking about it as soup, but that how it all weaves together to really create what is your experience in a human body, right? And this is what I mean when I say it often feels like you're working from a very different plane of you see, like, let's say, let's just take, for example, business, because that's sort of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Let's say we're thinking of something of like, oh, I have a business block, right? Which I know you don't believe in blocks, and we'll get into that later, and I don't actually either. But let's say we're coming from that level of understanding. Whereas for you, it's more about the fields that I just named. Can you sort of describe how your understanding and the field and the vibrational nature would lead to a different way of perhaps meeting that human experience of a quote unquote block?
I find it quite funny when people come and it's always like, I have this visibility block. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this. And it's never a visibility block. So what we do and what I also like, as I was doing this work and as I was meeting a lot of practitioners and as I was teaching, there's so much, well, basically literally everything in our lives that is very organized in a very like linear way. If this, then that. If you don't get a lot of views on Instagram, you have a visibility block. And let me fix that for you because I know exactly how to do that. Or if you afraid, like you feel some kind of, I don't know, tension in your chest and fear as you're about to speak on camera, you have a visibility block. Let me fix this for you. This is a very linear way of looking. Look, again, what is the body even? The body is not linear, like beyond linear, beyond binary, beyond this or that, beyond good or bad, or regulated, dysregulated, or block, no block, right? And there's always underlying foundational dynamics that play always, yeah, non-stop, always. Like what I said before, we are more pattern than we are matter, and we are more field than we are something that's like solid. But the denser the experience gets, like I don't like to talk about this way, but what people would name like lower vibration energy and this type of stuff, I haven't found like a better languaging for it yet. So I will name it like this. Like the more we are spending time there, the more the pattern solidifies and the harder it is to move. But at the core, like in the nature of it, it's always moving. And what I perceive is the underlying dynamic of this movement. And what I perceive also is like, what is then sticky? Like, which part of it feels a little more sticky? Like, where does it not move more? Because the kind of the characteristic of health or resonance is there tidal movement? Yes or no? Is there breath? Yes and no. And by breath, I don't mean like respiratory breath specifically, but yeah, kind of the energetic breath and movement, the tidal movement of expansion and contraction. And what I perceive, like, where is it sticky? Where is it like, where doesn't it flow? What is happening? Um, on the level of the foundational architecture of self that is composed not just through like not by the cell but also all these fields and everything that plays into you being you and your ecology and history and family and collective field and karmic field and mythic field and archetypal field, and there's so much to it. I could just go on and go on and go on and the whole time be like, and this field and this field and this field. And then sometimes, and what we do usually, we come with a specific, we identify it as a problem. There's like straight away, there's pathology. Right? This is something that's wrong with me. Let's fix that. But nothing is really wrong because this foundational pattern movement is always based on movement of health. And the body is always trying to, like, you can see it also as relational tactic of the body. And again, like, what is even body? Of the body to find some kind of again, I don't like the word balance because it does not exist, but it's not a homeostasis, but homeodynamics, right? The state of resonance. The state of resonance when the body is able to transfer energy, even the most intense energy. And when we come and we say, I have this block, I have this problem, let's fix that. And then we try to work on, like, how do you get better? I don't know, in coming on Instagram and talking to your camera, or like, like something also very, very specific. Like, how would we solve this? Like, how we resolve this little tiny problem, although the problem isn't the problem in the first place. And there's so much context that we just ignore. And so to me, it's always like, of course, like we humans, this is what we do. There's always this focal point. There's always some kind of squeeze. Like, oh, there's this thing, and I don't like this, and it must go. And then we look, okay, and what's the underlying intelligence? What the underlying foundation? Like, what is actually happening, and where is it sticky? How does that sound?
Yeah, I love that. I love the language of stickiness because I think of, I don't know, even my mind goes to like neuroplasticity even, and uh just psychological flexibility that we can create sort of being more the goal than like this rigidity, this fixedness,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word. Um, and so I'm just even thinking of the connections there, right? Of the body and the brain and the neuroplasticity and the movement. And
Yeah.
even like you're talking about the seasonal, the fact that we so quickly go to pathologize things when maybe, for example, we're just in a winter season or a void. And that is going to, if we just allow the movement to happen, go into a spring and then a summer and then a fall, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so much that we pathologize rather than just sort of, and my view and in my world, just sort of allowing the process to naturally unfold and supporting that process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so this non-linearity to it, this being more pattern than matter, and the fact that, even from the neuroplasticity standpoint, that the things that we practice a lot are going to get sticky, right? That they're going to get
Mm-hmm.
more cemented in.
Yeah.
And so I think we're talking about maybe related things on a different plane, but it kind of makes
Mm-hmm.
sense all together, I guess, is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah. 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 And the somatic field, right? The soma, the brain, the soma, this experience of the like the literal neuroplasticity and how the body learns and the patterns in the physical body. It's also a field. To me, I see it and perceive it as a somatic field. And somatic field is it's super important, right? It's like the size does not say anything about the importance, like this is better than this. Somatic field is a relatively small field compared, for example, to the collective field, right? And so very often I see, because I do work with advanced practitioners who are also highly sensitive, neurocomplex, like when we work, we function very differently. Our brain is different, body is different. And what tends to happen, I've seen it so many times, is that because we are so permeable, like literally our body is so permeable that we perceive and we pick up so much more than our personal field, like than what it is. And then we perceive something and pick it up from the collective, from the family field, from some like, yeah, different type difficulty. And because we perceive it so well, it feels like it's ours. And then we try to fix it, quote unquote, in our personal somatic field. You see the discrepancy? And it just doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and you do all the internal work, all the somatics, all the breath work, like I don't like all the plant medicine maybe, like, and you keep doing it and keep doing it, and it just keeps showing up and keeps showing up because there's this huge discrepancy, like there's a huge distance, and like you cannot ever resolve anything, any difficulty from the collective field through your personal field. It's just, yeah, it does not match in a way. And like I have it too, right? And all my people have it too. And so very often they come and they say, let's use this visibility block. And eventually is something that's completely like something from the collective field, something that's completely different. And something that I see also so very often, again, because I work with very advanced people and they've done so many trainings and they know so much, and they come to me with a diagnosis. I have this. I am dorsal today. I have visibility block. I am stuck in global high intensity activation. And like immediately, like there's a diagnosis. I know exactly what is happening. And it's always so interesting also to, okay, if we kind of loosen it up a little bit, the diagnosis, because the diagnosis also fortifies this experience being in it. And if you loosen it up a little bit and become super curious and again feel for the underlying foundations of what is happening, like what is actually happening. And again, I tell you every time is something else. It's never the diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many times where my clients come to me, and of course, we work with the very similar types of folks, right? The highly
Mhm.
sensitive, the neurocomplex. And I can't name the amount of times that folks will come to me thinking that it's a personal issue and
Yeah.
something that they need to overcome on their own. And then, of course, we uncover like, this isn't actually yours. This is
Mhm.
something from the collective. This is not yours at all. And there's always this relief, that
Mhm.
happens afterwards. And I know specifically you speak to a lot that this is something that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like you believe can really only be worked on in community itself. That something that is a relational has a relational origin needs to be met in a relational
Mhm.
capacity as well. Is that something that you can speak on?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something like especially when I just started doing specifically somatic trauma resolution work, and people would ask me like, "Can you make a course so I can do this on my own?" And no, I cannot. I am sorry, but this is not how it works. And now specifically speaking about the transpersonal trauma, relational trauma, right? Not the environmental or physical. Um, and so everything, the injury, the difficulty happened in relationship, and the healing and the returning to wholeness can only happen in relationship. And also something that I'm currently also navigating, kind of moving even more away from one-on-one work, which I still do, but less and less, and moving toward more and more group work. Because group work and group dynamics can access so much more that it blows my mind every time. And when you gather a group of people already, like let's call our people like advanced people, because they've done practices, they've done somatic work, they've done trainings, they know stuff. They know themselves, they know how they connect. And then the group dynamic, because the field becomes so very potent, the group dynamic unlocks so much more. And again, specifically for the type of people that I work with, right, that we carry a lot of history. It's like, very often my people feel like, why am I the one to metabolize all my ancestral and all the collective stuff and all this and all that? It's kind of, yeah, this vortex of energy, and something also, I think, like on the collective level that is currently happening, that is like intensification of all these experiences. Like, oh, I feel all these things are happening and I don't know what to do with this. And though this intensity can only be met and held in a very strong and potent, also intense field in a way. And then the group field and the group dynamics. And this is something that I'm so very passionate about, because this is so rare to be in a group that actually is a group. You know what I mean? Most of the times, it's individual dynamics between the facilitator and each person in a group setting. And something that actually feels as a group dynamic is so very rare. And my people always like, the moment they say yes to join either my year-long school, Imaginal Body, or the Portal Mastermind, like the moment they say yes, they enter the field and they like start reporting nonsensical wizardry happening because the group dynamic, like the field dynamic, the relational field is so potent. It's just like the words that I use the most these days, because I'm currently, like, as we speak, in the launching period of the portal, the mastermind, and things that are happening is just, they don't make any sense. Like the most magical, like miracles and nonsensical wizardry is happening. And this is the group dynamics. I would not be able to do this in a one-on-one setting.
I've heard you name that before, Katya, and it felt like relief when you named it. Just the fact of like there are so few truly pure group dynamics that it's more, okay, here's the facilitator and there's these one-on-one dynamics. Or there's the dynamic of like, okay, if it's a mastermind where another participant is coaching another, then there's the one-on-one between those folks. But the actual collective, maybe word I would use, group experience is super, super rare. And when you named that, I was like, yes, I've been in a lot of group containers and I've maybe been in one or two that's actually the way that you're describing. And I also find it, I totally agree with you that there is an element and you can't get in one-on-one that you have to receive in a group. And I also just, feel so strongly like, and maybe I'm just speaking, I don't think I'm just speaking from my experience here, because I think this is perhaps a collective experience of neurocomplex folks, but group dynamics specifically for me as an autistic person can be extremely challenging. And
Yes.
so there can be this sensation, right, of like I'm too much or I'm perceiving the world in a different way, and I've got to like hold myself back. I've got to tamp myself down. All of these things that a group dynamic can really bring up even further, and it can also be overwhelming for me sensory wise, amongst other things, right? And so the thing that I have to say, I mean, I would love to hear you speak on this specifically, but I also want to say that for me, I am such a huge proponent of relating to difference and being able to relate to difference, and also finding spaces for me as a neurocomplex person where my neurocomplex experience can be mirrored has been crucial. In other words, I needed to find a space where there wasn't difference, where I could just be me, where I could feel the resonance, and I think a lot of your language of like, oh, there's a lot of people having a similar experience to me, and there could be a space held where that just felt normal instead of the exception, right? And that to me was really growth, when I could stop kind of forcing myself to fit into group spaces that weren't really created for me. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yes to all of this. I had a very similar experience when joining groups and being just projected on, gaslit. Like, you try to share something from like a very careful place, like the kind of testing out the space, and you try to share something, and immediately it was just, no, we are not doing things like this. So yes, absolutely. And this is also one of the reasons why, like, okay, I must create spaces that where the baseline is very different. When there's immediately it's just a permission field by default. I don't even have to say it. People enter the field, they step over the threshold of the bodyverse, they enter the field, and there's already like, finally, I do not have to be more or less of what I am. I don't have to prove anything. If I don't feel like it, I can just, my people said, because I teach like my year-long school, yeah, and we have every other week we have class, and I teach a lot of theory and experience, and a lot of people come to class to sleep. They come to class to take naps, and they're like, these are the best naps in the world. Like, we just come into the field because I feel so tired and usually like completely exhausted, right? And usually you would not come to school to learn something, but they come, they take a nap, they wake up and like, oh, there's like some things are different. Like, what happened? And there's like a completely, what you said in the beginning is a completely different realm of like, from a completely different place we take the body in. They include the excluded. And yeah, I like, this is that gives me so much joy to be able to offer spaces where taking a nap is actually celebrated. Like, good for you. Good for you. And if taking naps for the whole year will be the only thing that you do, great. Enjoy yourself. Yeah.
I love that. It's amazing. Well, I know you have recently made the choice to leave Instagram and instead share freely on Telegram in a way that seems more energetically congruent with your work, which
Mm-hmm.
there can be a whole master class, if you would, on that we can talk about, choosing to leave what quote unquote you should be doing in a business sense, in the middle of a launch, no less. I know it's, but something that you shared on there, because I'm in that free Telegram channel and it's amazing. Everyone should join, just a shameless plug. But one thing that you shared that really stood out for me is that the results that we get in our business often stem from projections. And when those projections dissolve, far more becomes possible. So I would love to hear from you. Like, what do you mean by projections, and how can we work with them in that way that feels effortless, efficient, effective?
And the EEE way, we could have like a whole, I don't know, like a year-long conversation on projections, because the projection field tends to be one of the most stickiest. It's very, very hard to find yourself in it and to untangle, relatively hard. And so real projections can be anything from, and again, the way how I think of things is always from micro to macro. Yeah, from the cell or each atom of the body, from on the cellular level to the body as a whole, to the whole, yeah, cosmosis of the body, to the whole universe. And so to me, it's always like the whole range of it. And then the projection field can be anything from like people having opinions about you, how you're supposed to do business, like kind of more like family um dynamics. And this, like, I don't know, friends, and it's like, no, like, what are you doing? Aren't you supposed to go and do 9 to 5 and do a certain amount of work for a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time, in a way how we used to, in a very linear way? Yeah. And opinions, judgments is a huge one. Sometimes I kind of see it as a one field of projections, opinions, judgments, all this stuff. Sometimes you can also untangle it into different and see like, how does it affect me personally if I untangle and interact with each. And so around, specifically around the business and being an entrepreneur and building your own business, and I would say, this is an assumption that I would say is correct, is a projection assumption that everybody comes into this like, I'm gonna become a practitioner, I'm gonna build my own business from the place of, I really want my freedom. Like, I do not fit into offered systems. I would love to have freedom in the way how I live my life. Yeah, more or less. Of course, there's much more to this than this, but everybody wants freedom. And then what happens? Here we come, we start a business, and we bring with us all the baggage, all the fields, and everything that's entangled in our experience about this, how it's supposed to be or how it should be. Plus, we receive like all this information from the collective field and how hard it is, and how you still supposed to be exchanging your time for your money for a certain amount of work. And we just keep trying and trying. And the more we try, the harder the trying gets. And the more we try, the stickier the projection field gets, because it just fortifies and fortifies and fortifies. Um, and when I started building my business as a business, because like I said, it started kind of as a hobby, and I couldn't care less at that point, like years ago, because I was still working in corporate. That was my money making, although like the system is horrible, but there's another conversation. And I was doing it as the hobby, and I couldn't care less about like the business side. But then when I started doing, also approaching my business as business, I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense. I because I love learning, and I learn so fast, and I move so fast, and I was working with different coaches, and they would tell me, like business coaches, business somatic coaches as well, which very interesting. Again, a whole other conversation. They would tell me like, you're a beginner, so you need to like be less. You are in a reputation building phase, so don't ask this much money. Don't expect people to join any of your programs. Like, temper your enthusiasm, basically. I'm like, no. Actually, no, I do not agree. And so, what I could have done, and I've seen this happen so many times, like, yeah, authority figure projects something onto me, and they put me into a certain container. And then I could go and be like, okay, like, you know better. So I'm gonna do things like you said, because this is how things are done in this industry. Yeah, because I'm learning from the best, and they said so, so I'm gonna listen, which I didn't. I was like, no, I don't like that. I am not a beginner. I do not see, like, if I'm building this business as business, I can also approach it from like a very different perspective. And then also there was a layer for me of the way how I understand the body, beyond categories, beyond linearity, beyond being binary, beyond this or that, or beyond time for money, right? Same in business. How can I approach like what I teach and my body of work, and a human body and a collective body and my business body? I would probably should approach it exactly in the same way. And what I see happen very, very often, there's again separation and fragmentation around this. This is how you build the business. Those are the steps. Like, I know best how you should do this. Here's my templates. This is how you speak to your quote unquote target audience. This is like your market demographics. And I was just, every time people would say things like this, I was just like, no, no, those are actual people, living, breathing, actual people. Like, what? To me, just was wild. Like, how are we talking about actual people in the business of being practitioner? You speak to me about the actual human people from this perspective of them being a marketing segment? No. I am not doing that. And so, yeah, for me, it was a lot of just disagreeing and rebelling against everything, basically. And this is also the reason, like, I left Instagram as my primary channel in the middle of the launch. People got very confused. Like, you want to see some magic? Come to Telegram. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just get the sense, because you have this ability to notice projections and step outside of them, that it allows you the ability, which I think a lot of people maybe chat about online, but
Mm.
perhaps aren't embodying or living, that you truly just get to be yourself
Mm-hmm.
in your marketing, in your business, outside of what other people are projecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is actually the way to do that, to be able to notice what things are projections and be able to say, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I get to do this in my own way. And that's something that I notice about you, is that there's this kind of like wild, untamed feralness, if you would,
Thank you.
of just being able to, like this is, and even going back, I want to circle back too and like loop in the too muchness that you've spoken about multiple times of, because there can be this sense almost of like drinking from a fire hose, because there is this prolificness
Mm-hmm.
about you and about the level of quote unquote content creations. Really, it's just the living, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That you put out, and I'm naming this because I have the same thing. Like
Mm.
I actually have this, like, anyone that's worked with me, there's just kind of this head spinning, feeling that they get of like, it's so much, like you move so fast. And I
Mm-hmm.
think especially in the somatic world, people can really view that as like, oh, well, you're hyper aroused.
Yeah.
You're stuck in fight or flight. And I'm like, actually, no, this is just me being, this is my
Yeah.
healthy fast,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
this is me. I can also, like, there is choice to slow down, and there is choice of times, like a lot of times for me that hits in my luteal phase or during my bleed, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as prolific, and I there's no push for me not to be, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
okay, like it's not flowing as fast right now. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
But during the times of the month or in the seasons where, let's say, I'm working towards something or I'm rebuilding something or I feel passionate about something, it just comes out like a fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
And that is
Mm-hmm.
naturally how I work and move. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I know something that you've spoken about is it's not depleting to you. And
Yeah.
it's not depleting to me either. It's actually energizing to me, right?
Yes, it is very life-giving
Yeah.
because I go with life. I co-create with life and not against. And this is also so interesting because currently I'm meeting so many more practitioners who is actually like, actually, healthy fast. I love it. Because we like in the whole healing and somatic world, the nervous system is like slowing down, slowing down, slowing down, slowing down. And a lot of again generalizing people in general and a lot of healing practitioners and somatic practitioners, there's actually so much freeze. And again, this is not a pathology, this is not to like shame anybody. Freeze is our default state. Yeah, and um the more we spend time there, the better we get at freeze. Yeah, neuroplasticity and all things. And then we just get into this like self conversation and mythology around that, like, this is me listening to my body. Like, actually, I don't think so. And when like a lot of practitioners who come work with me, right? They come from this experience of like slowing down, and you need to be so gentle and quiet and slow, and even slower than that. And it's just like, and it just goes so against their nature. And then they meet me, and we like in my school, right? I teach like deep trauma stuff, the most serious shit, and we go fast sometimes, and sometimes we slow down, and there's a whole range available from like the slowest primordial slow to the fastest speed of light, like done, 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 done energy. And people get confused by the range. Like, aren't you supposed to be like one thing? Oh no, honey. Oh no. You haven't seen nothing yet. But yes, exactly. This is like the prolificness, the open channel, because the more you go with life, yeah, the direction that life is taking you, still having the somatic choice inside of this. And today, actually, one of my students, she sent me a message. Like the words that we use for this state is manic, effortless, effective, efficient, aliveness, manic, aliveness. So when you're in the state of manic aliveness, that again can have a whole range from the slowest slow to the highest high. And when you are in the state of this manic aliveness and all the choice, like the somatic choice, the ability to slow down, the choice to like, "Oh, actually now I'm gonna take a nap. And actually now I don't have to write this post or email because it's on my schedule or something like this, you know? There's still so much choice and you feel the life so deeply, like through every tissue of your body, through all the dimensions of self, through aspects of self. And there's so much is happening at the same time. And there's a fractals of presence. And at this point, the slowing down becomes the function of presence. The slowing down is not a function of speed. When we're slowing down with speed, very often we meet freeze. And again, very good, do it, nothing wrong with that. But there's a lot of differentiation, kind of like in my experience also, what is freeze and what is the actual resonant slowness, what is the resonant speed, right? And I've been judged for my speed or the prolificness, or like, why do you share so much? It makes us look bad. Like, oh, like, not my problem. Now, can you not share so much because it makes us look bad? Like, interesting. But actually, exactly like what I said and you mentioned, it is very life-giving because there's so much coherence in the experience.
Yeah, and there has even, to add another dimension to what you're sharing, there has been times where I have tamped myself down in the prolificness of what I share, not just for the sake of other practitioners, so much as feeling like I needed to do that for the people in my containers, that I was overwhelming
Mm.
them, right? Um,
Mhm.
and, I heard you actually say something within your Telegram channel of like, everyone in here is grown ass adults. Like you can choose to listen or not listen, or
Yeah.
take or take. Like if you are in an overwhelmed space and you need to not take in as much, don't do that.
Brains. Yeah.
It's this freedom as well of like I get to be as prolific as I am, and you also get to take in what feels good for you, and you get
Mhm.
that choice as well, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is what I always like. I'm repeating this so many times. Like every time we have class, there is always tidal movement. I don't need you. Like I don't need anything from you as the quote unquote teacher or like your space holder, whatever role I'm in. I don't need anything from you. You are doing it to yourself. So would you please find the tidal movement of how do you engage with this space? Like when does it feel supportive? When does it not feel supportive? Because I do not expect like my program is one full year, 12 months is a lot of time. I do not expect everybody inside of this program to be equally interested and equally engaged throughout the whole time. That would be madness. Then I would be worried. Right? But I want everybody to move tidally in and out, noticing. And also for me, like such a huge shift was because like coming from the trauma education and trauma field and somatics and this type work, right? We are trained to be very quote unquote trauma informed, which most of the times means like tippy-toeing and being very careful and like, oh, like trigger warning, everybody close your ears, I'm gonna say something, like, like very hyper vigilant. And to me, it always felt very hyper vigilant. And I don't like to be treated like this. Like, if the facilitator does not trust that I am able to hold myself, how could I trust ever that I can hold myself? And so to me, it was like a big pivoting moment also. Like, actually, I don't want to treat my people like they children. I'm going to treat my people like adults as they are. And like they have choice because they do. And I cannot ever make them do anything. And this was like a huge, huge shift for me at some point.
Yeah. There's a lot of benevolent contempt that happens in our containers, right? We think that it's being kind, we think it's being loving, and as you named, it's actually infantilizing in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Being able to just treat the people who are in our containers as sovereign, as capable, as whole, as adults, as the master of their own experiences, and trusting like people to bow in, bow out, to come in, to come out, to flow within our containers, and trusting ourselves to not make that mean something about our containers, right? Of like,
Yes.
okay, if this person is less engaged at this point in time, that doesn't mean that I'm not bringing it in my container. Just who knows what they have going on, right? There's so much sovereignty needed on both sides, and especially as the facilitator, that we need to be able to hold that. I feel like we've gotten deeper into the group dynamics here as well that we talked about earlier, but I love this. So I want to speak a little bit to untangling, because I know I've heard you mention that word, and I've heard you mention it today as well, and that this is something you often talk about, and how when we sort of untangle from, let's say, projections or some of what is in any of these fields that you've named, like that it really opens up what I've heard you say, that anything is possible, right? When we untangle, that anything becomes possible. There's infinite possibilities. And specifically, you've said that the felt sense is one of the easiest ways to step into that untangling. Can you explain a little bit of what you mean by that, and maybe even share some examples of where this might have come alive for you or a client?
And there's another, like, I love all these questions because it's like a universe of exploration available. Like, how do I keep it like short enough? I'm just gonna bring one example. Also happened today with someone reaching out, someone in my school, um, having kind of struggles around how do I speak to my perfect client, quote unquote, ideal client, like having this category of the ideal client. And this is a part, as the way how I perceive it, like having this marketing frameworks. This is a very much a part of the whole business building marketing field. And it has a very specific somatic and energetic signature when you really like feel into it, right? When you really kind of step into it and you allow for yourself to have an experience of it. And one of the best way, my students always laugh at me and ask question like, when are we gonna get the bodyverse, what's it called? Like, stationary is the word. Because I love using pieces of paper is very advanced technology. So a way to feel into it and to differentiate a little bit more would be to put on a piece of paper, to just write down words that resonate with you around this specific field, like let's say marketing field, online marketing field, has a very specific quality to it. And when you go and stand into it, or you can just like ask a normal object, like an item, represent, like, please represent online marketing field, and you just feel into the experience, you will have a very specific experience. And the more you do this work, the easier it gets to differentiate. Yeah, and so it's a field, And when you are an entrepreneur and you step into this field by default, you kind of enter the whole online marketing field by default. You consent and you agree and you stand in it. And it becomes a part of your experience. And so then you struggle with speaking, like, what is the perfect messaging of speaking to my ideal client? And again, this is a very specific problem, quote unquote. There is a diagnose of this is the problem, this is the issue. Very specific thing. But actually, when we feel into the experience of the online marketing field and we are able to step out of it, even for a moment, to have this experience of this is me stepping out, and like you can feel there's like a wave of just, and it moves out, and then it moves in again, and it moves out again, and then you have this like tidal movement again with the field, and eventually you can learn to not be in it and to have your own, like your specific marketing field, right? And you can literally like build your own field and strengthen it and fortify it. And so when we step out of it and there's suddenly so much space, and suddenly this question is irrelevant, it doesn't matter, because the way how I speak is how I speak to my perfect client. The way when I'm rooted in my experience of self, this is how I speak to my perfect client. And and you see how a lot of the times we could spend a lot of time resolving this problem and working on the messaging and working on this, like all these things. Not necessary. It's not effortless, effective, efficient at all. And so yeah, that would be an example. Just happened today. How does it begin to answer your question?
It does, and I'm really glad that I've heard you use the pieces of paper many times, so I'm glad you brought that example for people to tangibly try something on. And I highly recommend, like, stop the podcast, pause, try it, right?
Do it. Yeah.
Right? Do it, actually do it. Don't just listen to it and then, oh yeah, I'll try it later. Like, stop, pause, do it. Um, but I'm also glad that you circled back to saying, like, there's this very specific thing that you know I think you were talking about the world of online marketing and like how do I show up and talk to my ideal client. Like, there's this very specific thing that's perceived as quote unquote the problem. And uh, uh, what came to mind for this, because we were talking about the specific problem of the visibility blocks before, and what comes to mind, and I almost get like a visual with this, is the way that I'm seeing it. But it's that specific thing that you're perceiving as the problem is the portal,
It is.
which is the reason for the name, right? It is the portal, it is the entryway, it is the portal to that manic aliveness, right?
Yes.
And that is what I 1,000% believe in my work as well. Like, our work is a little bit different, but that's precisely my point as well. Is like, anything in your business that's coming up for you that you think is the thing is the portal, right? It is. And specifically, a piece that overlaps about our work as well is just this desire to be fully human, right? And it is the portal to your full humanity if you allow it to be. We could sort of stay in this upward level of like viewing it as a problem, or we can allow it to open up into the portal of our full humanity if we so choose. And in your case, it's like, okay, this is the portal for this manic aliveness if I allow it to be. That I just wanted to name that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And this is, yeah, kind of the entanglement, to the point that sometimes we stop even differentiating like what is me and what's not me. And by seeing things for what they are, and sometimes like literally stepping out of something like piece of paper, suddenly there's differentiation. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets. And then the more you practice it again, the more you can, exactly what you said, like you can see each focal point as a portal into like a range of experience. Yeah.
Yeah. 1000%. Well, I think I have one last question for you because it feels too juicy not to ask before we go into our rapid fire questions. I want to be mindful of not making this too long because I could talk to you for a very long time. But specifically, again, I want to name just like an area of giftedness or embodiment that I see in you, this like I named before, this wildness, this feralness, this allowing yourself to fully be yourself. And I think especially for neurocomplex folks, for highly sensitive folks, there's this tendency to, like I said, want to shrink or sanitize, or maybe even the word simplify ourselves in order to make sense online or whatever it is. And how do we stop squeezing ourselves into something palatable and instead bring that wild whole selves into our marketing and really into our work, into our business?
I would say just stop trying. Just stop trying because this is the trying. And I've been trying also so hard to squeeze myself into certain categories and simplify. And I've been told also so many times by authority figures, or I gave them the authority, right? You just need to simplify. You cannot be talking about all these things. Like you need to choose a topic, make it specific, solve specific problem. And it just feels like it's killing my soul. And so I didn't. And the key to me is always the moment I notice any flavor, like any amount of this trying energy, like how trying to explain myself or trying to be simple enough or palatable enough or whatever, like slow enough if I'm talking to somatic people, like trying, any type of trying, I stop. Like, okay, let's rewind a little bit. Like, what is happening here? What are the dynamics? What are the underlying dynamics that are at play? Can I, again, like, can I untangle a little bit? Can I find myself and recenter? And then if there's an action, I will do an action. So stop trying. That's the advice.
I love that. And just having that as a cue, like when I notice myself trying, I'm going to stop. I'm going to recenter. Yeah, so good. Well, before we go into rapid fire, I would love to know how people can learn more about you and your work, Katya.
The best is the Telegram. I enjoy it so much. It's such a generative, dynamic space, the way how I perceive it, and in the way how also people every day send me reactions. They're like, I'm obsessed. What is this? Like, what is happening here? Telegram would be the best because currently my whole business is also like in the reformation, removing platforms, removing websites, writing new copy. Like there's a lot of movement happening, and this Telegram feels like such a juicy, rich place to be.
I'll make sure and link it in the show notes for everyone. All right. So transitioning into the rapid fire questions here is
I'm actually very scared about those.
they're meant to be lighthearted and fun, and you don't have to think about them very hard at all.
Okay.
But is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from the podcast?
No, I feel like I really enjoyed the conversation. It kind of touched on very important to me topics, around the group dynamics and entanglement and all this juicy stuff.
Me too. What do you wish people knew about your experience as a neurocomplex person in the world?
These things are so difficult for me. This is what I want people to know, because as a neurocomplex person, I do not deal well with this type like lighthearted, rapid fire questions. Like I don't know what to say, and so I feel weird about it. But also, while I feel weird, I feel very good about myself. So that would be the answer.
What's the last thing that truly inspired you?
My mentor inspires me a lot. She's 73-year-old. Is she human? I'm not sure at this point. But she can see me like no one else can, and offers so much like this deep resonance support, and inspires me so much to be myself, because like how I say it always, she's the most trauma informed person. She does not follow any rules, and I'm like, I want to be like you, but like me when I grow up.
I love that. What consistently brings you deep joy?
My morning walks and conversation with the geese I have each morning. Because here, just a little side note for those who don't know, I live in the Netherlands, and here we have a lot of wild geese just on street. They just live there. Those are their streets. Those are not human streets. And I love it so much.
Thank you so much for your time. And I just specifically feel called to thank you for bringing your depths and not sanitizing yourself and whitewashing yourself and making yourself palatable, but bringing the full ferocity of who you are into the world, into your offers and your containers. Thank you so much for your
Thank you
time
so
today.
much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.